Hello, I'm Esther Githu. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. Congo's leader Felix Tshisekedi calls on young people to enlist in the army to stop the M23 rebels from attempting to seize more territory in the country's conflict-battered east. 67 people are dead following a mid-air collision between a passenger jet and a military helicopter at Washington D.C.'s Ronald Reagan National Airport. And we'll hear from an expert on China's discount artificial intelligence model DeepSeek, and that it claims to use less data and lower-cost computer chips. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Leaders of the East African Community Bloc are communicating on how best to resolve the crisis in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Top officials from Kenya, Somalia, Tanzania, Burundi, South Sudan, Rwanda and Uganda participated in an urgent meeting Wednesday to discuss the escalating conflict between the DRC government and the M23 rebel group. Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi did not participate in the meeting. M23 rebels in Congo are moving south on Wednesday toward Bukavu, the capital of South Kivu province, in what appeared to be an attempt to expand their area of control in Congo's east after capturing the city of Goma. Meanwhile, angry youth set fire to the embassies of Belgium, France, Kenya, Uganda and Rwanda. The protesters accused those countries of supporting Rwanda, which Kinshasa accuses of backing the M23 rebels. But Kigali has steadfastly denied the accusations. Democratic Republic of the Congo President Felix Tshisekedi has announced a vigorous military response to M23 rebel fighters capturing more territory in the east. Meanwhile, over 280 Romanian military contractors fighting with the Congolese forces have surrendered to M23 rebels and were taken to Rwanda from Goma. We get more in this report filed by VOA's Ostea Malivika and narrated by Paul Ndiho.
The M23 fighters advanced on a second front Wednesday, capturing 2 districts in South Kivu after mainly defeating the Congolese army in northern Kivu's capital, Goma. Despite the support of a 14,000-strong UN peacekeeping force and regional troops, the Congolese military has faced multiple defeats. DRC President Felix Tshisekedi, who has been quiet since the Goma offensive began, assures the nation of a vigorous response from the army in the eastern region.
In the face of this situation, let me reassure you that a vigorous coordinated response against these terrorists and their sponsors is underway. Our valiant armed forces of the Democratic Republic of Congo, symbols of courage and patriotism, are fully mobilized, ready to defend every inch of our territory.
Many people in eastern Congo's escalating rebellion face a grim choice: retreat into the interior to seek protection from a weak army which is accused of supporting the rebels. On Wednesday, hundreds, including at least 280 Romanian military contractors described by Rwandan authorities as mercenaries, were seen crossing into Rwanda after surrendering to the M23 rebel forces. Willie Ngoma is the M23 spokesperson.
We released the mercenaries. They went home. There were 289 mercenaries. Let the people of Goma be calm. Peace is here. We are a people's army. We will watch over their security. We will bring peace, no hustling. We do not steal. We do not rape. Peace is truly total. We are a people's army. What we must do is denounce all these bandits who are still hiding their weapons so that they can work with us in this sense so that we can stop them.
The M23 armed group and Rwandan troops have seized the city's airport and key locations. This has raised concern about the ability of Congolese troops and their allies to protect civilians as conflict resurges near Rwanda. Over 1,200 Congolese, including surrendering soldiers, have sought refuge in Rwanda since the takeover, which has overwhelmed the local hospitals and closed the airport. Rebel leaders are planning to establish an administration in Goma, shattering a 2024 ceasefire and recalling the M23's previous city capture. Despite evidence, Rwanda denies supporting M23 rebels. But UN experts estimate up to 4,000 of Rwandan troops are in Congo. Paul Ndiho for Austeri Malivika, VOA News, Goma.
Turning now to a nighttime tragedy in the U.S. skies of the U.S. Capitol. The National Transportation Safety Board is investigating a deadly mid-air collision between a regional jet and a U.S. military helicopter that happened late Wednesday as the plane approached the Washington D.C. Reagan National Airport. Federal authorities say there are no survivors among the 60 passengers and 4 crew members on the American Airlines flight or the Black Hawk helicopter, which had 3 soldiers aboard the training flight. A Federal Aviation Administration statement says the jet operated by American Airlines was traveling from Wichita, Kansas, and was approaching its landing runway at the time of the collision with the Sikorsky H-60 helicopter around 9 p.m. local Washington time. Video of the crash captured from a camera at the nearby Kennedy Center shows 2 sets of lights converging before a fireball erupts. The crash prompted a large emergency response, including boats in the Potomac River, which planes fly over to make landings at the airport. Officials say the body of the plane was found upside down in 3 sections in waist-deep icy river water. The wreckage of the helicopter was also found. So far, there is no immediate word on the cause of the collision. Investigators will attempt to piece together the jet's final moments before its collision with the helicopter. For more on the mid-air collision between the plane and the helicopter, let's go to VOA's Carol Van Dam, who is standing by near the Potomac River crash site. Carol, what are authorities saying about the conditions at the time of the crash?
They said that the conditions were not abnormal. They said it was about 50 degrees. It was just before 9 o'clock local time, p.m. Eastern time here. And it was a little bit of wind. It was about 16 mile per hour winds, but nothing out of the ordinary. And the Transportation Secretary has said that both the helicopter and the plane were on standard paths. As you said, the airplane was coming in for an arrival from Wichita, Kansas. It was just a few minutes from its arrival time at the airport when this collision occurred. Now, one thing that I read that is sort of unconfirmed is that the air traffic control tower had asked the airplane pilots to switch to a shorter runway not long before their arrival, which they agreed to do. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but that's one thing that I'm sure the investigators are looking into.
Carol, do we know how many bodies have been recovered as we speak?
They're now saying 28 bodies have been recovered. They're still in a kind of a recovery mode here. They're no longer searching for survivors. But we saw at least 4 or 5 boats when we arrived here about an hour ago, still going through, combing the waters. And there's been several military helicopters that have been flying overhead, flying low. So we can only assume that they're part of this operation, emergency operation too.
What else are you seeing happening around the crash site?
Well, interestingly, just about 6-7 minutes ago, before you came on with me, they just reopened National Airport. It was closed for all of these emergency operations. And now just behind me, let me show you where we are. We're about a half a mile from National Airport. You can see the National Monument, I think, over my shoulder. And you can also maybe see the Capitol. We're zooming in, trying to give you a little better look, but we're not far. We're on the Virginia side of the Potomac River, and it's about a half a mile from the airport, and the recovery efforts are just around that bend up there. And as you might imagine, they're not letting us get much closer than where we are now.
Yeah, I noticed this morning as I drove past, the security is very tight around there. But have you been able to speak to any family member who may have lost someone in that airplane?
No, but we do know that there were figure skaters. There were U.S. figure skaters on board that plane, along with their coaches, along with some family members. They say at least 20 figure skaters, including 2 former quite famous Russian figure skaters. They were coming from this development camp, this training camp that was done in conjunction with the U.S. figure skating event that was happening in Canada. And that's really all we know. We know that everyone is devastated that new people on board that flight, but they're not really speaking to reporters at the time.
All right, Carol, hopefully we get to hear more, and wow, what a tragedy. We are all saddened by this. VOA's Carol Van Dam reporting live from near the Potomac River crash location in Washington, D.C. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., President Donald Trump's nominee to serve as America's top health official, faced tough questions from senators Wednesday about his views on vaccinations, COVID-19, and the nation's health care system. A member of one of America's most famous political families, Kennedy could face a tough road to confirmation. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson has more.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., President Donald Trump's choice to lead the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, told senators Wednesday the United States faces significant health challenges that require fresh thinking.
I've often disturbed the status quo by asking uncomfortable questions. Well, I'm not going to apologize for that. We have massive health problems in this country that we must face honestly.
A former environmental attorney turned healthcare activist and author, Kennedy receives strong support from Senate Republicans considering his nomination to lead the $1.7 trillion government agency that controls healthcare that covers half the nation.
You represent a voice for an inspiring coalition of Americans who are deeply committed to improving the health and well-being of our nation.
But Kennedy faces significant concerns about his past statements about vaccines, reproductive rights, and AIDS.
Mr. Kennedy has embraced conspiracy theories, quacks, charlatans, especially when it comes to the safety and efficacy of vaccines. He has made it his life's work to sow doubt and discourage parents from getting their kids life-saving vaccines.
Kennedy said some of his most controversial remarks during a podcast interview had been taken out of context.
I said there are no vaccines that are safe and effective, and I was going to continue for every person. Every medicine has people who are sensitive to them, including vaccines.
Right. So
he interrupted me at that point. I've corrected it many times, including on national TV.
Kennedy pledged to support childhood vaccines if confirmed. But senators are concerned about his statements about a range of health issues, including his statements about COVID-19.
Did you say that COVID-19 was a genetically engineered bioweapon that targets black and white people, but spared Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people?
I didn't say it was deliberately targeted. I just quoted an NIH-funded and NIH-published study.
His conclusions from a 2020 report have been dismissed by scientists. Kennedy was also asked about his views on key programs impacted by President Trump's foreign aid funding freeze, including PEPFAR, a successful AIDS prevention program.
I'd like to know whether you support the objectives and goals of PEPFAR, and would you work with me and my colleagues to make sure that this program continues to provide life-saving antiviral drugs to people who are most in need?
I absolutely support PEPFAR, and I will happily work with you to strengthen the program.
The Senate Finance Committee will vote on Kennedy's nomination in the near future. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Newly elected U.S. President Donald Trump is promising to boldly reshape the country's relationship with Africa. From trade agreements to aid assistance, official U.S. positions are likely to take a different approach to secure their interests. VOA's Anthony Labruto is live at the Carnegie Endowment for Peace in Washington, D.C., where American and African experts are meeting to discuss how to best approach the expected changes in U.S. policy. Hello, Anthony. Tell us more about today's activities.
Absolutely. So we're here right downtown Washington D.C. at the Carnegie International Center for Endowment for Peace, where a group of experts and analysts are now meeting to discuss the U.S.-Africa foreign policy angles. Really, the main theme here, though, is a compendium which was just published by the Carnegie Center, really compiling a U.S. perspective, really a holistic policy evaluation of U.S. foreign investment, U.S. diplomatic missions, really a U.S. foreign policy a lexicon of their decisions so far.
And how are the experts looking to address U.S. foreign policy toward the continent of Africa?
Absolutely. So the compendium really lists 12 key objectives, really listing out foreign direct investment from the United States, diplomatic missions, U.S. relationships with other countries that are also competing on the African continent, how Africans view the United States and the United States objectives so far. Really a lot of good points. Really a couple of key points that really have stood out to me that the experts have recommended in this compendium are that the U.S. should reestablish their diplomatic missions in Western Africa. You know, we remember the troops being pulled out of Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso. Really kind of a dramatic picture of U.S. really being kicked out of that area. But this argues that really the United States should take a greater role, really reinvesting itself, really demonstrating that the U.S. can make a great case for foreign direct investment for a lot of other initiatives that it was doing before it left. Another key point here, too, was the minerals investment. The U.S., according to this, is also one of the biggest investors of mineral investment, of mineral extraction in West Africa and throughout the entire continent. And so really, what can the United States do to help these countries better achieve their energy goals, better form their mineral goals, and how in turn can these countries also help the United States really create a beneficial trade bloc for them as well?
Anthony, we know that there have been a bit of concern from African leaders as well, wondering how the relationship is going to be like between the new administration of President Trump and the continent. What are you hearing from African leaders attending this event or other experts there on what they expect moving forward?
Absolutely. So actually, we had the pleasure of listening to the Madagascar ambassador pose a question to one of the panels here a little bit earlier. She was wondering really, where can the U.S. Find, I guess, greater involvement? Where can it really brand itself to be a standout foreign direct investor in her country in particular? Really, the main takeaways from this compendium have been that African leaders are interested in having further engagement with the United States. They'd like to see further diplomatic missions, more things like the Libido Corridor, really invest in other key regions of the continent that can bring a lot more economic activity to hubs as opposed to just not random but necessarily targeted or isolated investments in particular countries, particular regions. A little bit more holistic development, re-upping things like AGOA, expanding things like AGOA to where greater goods can be transferred between the United States and Africa. Really overall that there is willingness from African leaders to have a greater dialogue with the United States, and that there is a willingness really from the continent that they would like to see. Really an interesting point, though, again from the compendium, is that Africans and African leaders have one of the highest favorability ratings of foreign direct investment from the United States. And so not only is that the foreign direct investment, but that's also the way in which they do it, through USAID and through really these partnerships rather than almost kind of a steamrolling over of infrastructure, of existing things, of existing agreements. Really that the fact that the United States is willing to sit down, listen to African leaders, and present funding in a way that would be agreeable to what's already on the books in really an interesting way.
Anthony, thank you very much for your reporting. Definitely looking forward to a good partnership with the continent. VOA's Anthony Labruto live for us from the Carnegie Endowment for Peace here in Washington, D.C. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 in all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, we'll learn about China's discount artificial intelligence model DeepSeek. Stay with us.
Lupus is a mysterious autoimmune disease that primarily affects women of childbearing age between 15 and 44 years. It occurs when the body's immune system produces antibodies that attack its own healthy tissues and organs. On the next edition of Our Voices, we will focus on this chronic autoimmune disease, its symptoms, its causes, and its treatment. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other news, High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk is appealing on Thursday for $500 million in funding for 2025 to support its work, such as investigating human rights abuses around the world from Syria to Sudan, warning that lives hang in the balance. The annual appeal is for funds beyond the allocated UN funds from member states' fees, which make up just a fraction of the AFC's needs. And a small aircraft carrying oil workers in South Sudan's Unity State crashed Wednesday, killing 20 people. An official said the plane crashed at the Unity Oilfield Airport on Wednesday morning as it was heading to the capital, Juba, according to Gatwich Bipal, Unity State's information minister. With China's announcement this week of its discount artificial intelligence model DeepSeek that claims to use less data and lower-cost computer chips, what does it mean for AI in the United States and President Trump's plan to invite private investment in data centers and AI expansion? VOA's Philip Alexiou talked with Sam Winter-Levy about this. He is a fellow in technology and international affairs at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.
So over the past few years, the US has progressively tightened these export controls on China. They were initially only touched on kind of the most kind of cutting edge frontier chips, but left a lot of loopholes that allowed the Chinese companies to kind of buy slightly less good chips. Over the past couple of years, those controls have been progressively tightened. A lot of the chips that DeepSeek used were purchased before these progressive tightenings of the export controls. So I think in the next administration, in the next few years, we'll probably see those export controls be increasingly tightened to try to try to restrict DeepSeek's abilities to train these frontier models even further.
Because the president has said that this is a big wake-up call.
Today and over the last couple of days, I've been reading about China and some of the companies in China, one in particular, coming up with a faster method of AI.
He also said it's good news because it means AI could be cheaper. So what does it do to the announcement from last week?
Yeah, so it was an amazing split screen where on the one hand you had the United States rolling out $500 billion of investments in Texas and elsewhere in data centers to train these kind of frontier models. And on the other hand, this kind of relatively small Chinese startup releasing a kind of cutting-edge model for about $5 million. So really a remarkable split screen. And part of the low cost of DeepSeek's model is what has triggered this kind of sell-off of NVIDIA stocks, because it suggests that potentially for any given level of performance of an AI model, you can achieve that level with far fewer chips. You don't necessarily need as many data centers, as much investment as perhaps might have been expected. On the other hand, it still is always better to have more chips than fewer chips. The more chips you have, the more experiments you can run, the more data you can build, the more you can deploy these models widely. And so I think it's inevitable that even if these new models, drive down the price of the kind of, of very impressive models, we're still going to need a huge amount of computing power to deploy these models widely in the economy. And so I think things like the Stargate announcement from President Trump and Sam Altman and the other tech CEOs involved in that, I think those investments are still going to be really important to just roll out, to build the capability to roll out these models across the economy more broadly.
And one thing that President Trump has been talking about also, and one of the announcements was that he wants to really loosen the regulations so that these data centers and this infrastructure into AI can speed along faster.
Yeah, so I think taking a step back, the US government and a lot of the tech companies' perspective on this is that these AI systems could unlock really significant new capabilities in defense, in R&D, with potentially major implications for geopolitics and the global balance of power. And so as a result, they think it's really important that the data centers that underpin these new systems will be built within the United States, so that the United States can retain control over the data centers that are hosting the world's most powerful models. And so this imperative to build these data centers within the United States as much as possible is what explains a bunch of the moves that the Biden administration made in its last kind of months in office, where they were trying to ease some of the regulations, ease the permitting requirements, and unlock new abilities to generate electricity for these data centers. And I think the Trump administration is going to continue that, to try and deregulate, to make it easier to build data centers domestically, to try and carve out federal land, potentially, where you can build data centers that avoid a lot of the kind of permitting requirements that you might otherwise need, and to try and make it easier to bring new energy onto the grid to fuel these data centers. So I think we're going to see a lot more of the build out of data centers within the United States.
That was Sam Winter-Levy at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, speaking with VOA's Philip Alexiou in Washington. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.